Here we are. It's already the end of September, heading into October already. Fall or autumn. Sorry, Josh. Autumn is in the air. Can you feel it, Mike? Dr. Mike?
Yes, you can start feeling that particulate matter start building up in the air.
Summer is definitely
buffeted by falling leaves.
Summer is definitely gone. Welcome back to the KrakCast News, everybody. I'm John. Josh is here. Dr. Mike is here. Dave is out this week. And we still have a lot to talk about, as always.
Even without Dave.
Even without Dave. Always a lot to talk about. Let's start with the headline.
Although arguably with less interruptions.
And you just interrupted me to say that, though. So
I did.
Okay.
You saw what I did there.
Yeah, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Let's start with some local news, Dr. Mike. Interesting, controversial happenings at the Archdiocese here in Krakow with some people getting fired, I guess, depending on who you ask, for controversial, interesting reasons.
Well, yes. Last week, the Archdiocese has its communications, public relations kind of department, which was run by 5 women, and they've been working for the Archdiocese.
Is that really fair?
I guess.
5 women, I mean...
Well, we're going to get into the issue of fairness here in a second. Yeah, for sure. Maybe they're better at communications.
Well, apparently not, because the details I tried to dig up on this story have all been contradictory and kind of wrong.
Yeah, it's really, we tried to get down the definitive version of events here, and it's really hard. So we're going on the best information that we have at the moment. So we'll see how it goes in the next week.
Basically, this department, the communications department, has been working for the Archdiocese for years, with the current Archbishop for the last 2 years. All the women that work there, all the people that work there, don't have the regular employment contracts. They work on these they're called umowy śmieciowe to a certain extent, this civil contracts where you just say, we work together, but we can quit at any time we want for just 1 month.
And it's basically a tax dodge, essentially.
Yeah, it is to a certain extent. But these jobs are often, they're all day jobs, or you're just there for a couple of hours a day or something like that. It's very fluid as
like a contract.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently 3 women, one article said that they got rid of the department completely, but most articles are saying that 3 women were fired, suggesting that these women were fired because 2 of those women were unmarried with children. Actually, another article said only 1 of them was unmarried with children. This is where I'm saying when I get very confused. You see this article on the TV screen, church fires women because they're not married and have kids, and I go into it, I'm seeing 3 different versions of this.
Now wait, is this the angle, the whole unmarried with kids thing, is this angle coming from any official sources?
The church actually mentioned in one of its statements they're basically saying this was done in good faith. We both decided to end our mutual cooperation, but they mentioned in the articles that 2 of these women are not married, and it's why did you mention that detail in there? It's okay. And they say they kept the other women on who were married normally, but the main one, who's the head of the department, she claims she was fired. She doesn't know why, and the communication with the Archdiocese was turbulent. But then the Archdiocese says, she actually on August 10th sent us, a formal letter requesting that she be let go. And, with the contractual obligation of 1 month that passed, and we let her go, September 19th. And together with her 2 closest subordinates left with her as well. And I'm trying to figure, so what's the problem here? If she apparently said she wanted to be let go, why is she now saying that she doesn't know why she was let go?
Okay, so
I get the feeling that there's a lot of just internal politics here, just office politics.
Well, that's what I'm going to let me try to clean this up a little bit, because again, we're acknowledging that the details are a little hard to nail down exactly right now, but there's still an interesting story here, because the church obviously is at the very center of a nexus of social, political, maybe, media stories. And when something like this happens, it's only, it's kind of obvious these days that it's going to be front page news, especially given the church's vocal opposition to things like LGBT and whatnot recently. And so, this is not going to be something that's going to be forgotten in the media. Okay.
Yes, this bishop is being, criticized very heavily because of his article, his opinions on LGBT, that he gives during sermons.
Very outspoken on this, but it does bring up an interesting subject, I think, about who you are allowed to hire and fire for whatever reason, or maybe no reason whatsoever. Oh, and by the way, we should also mention people from the labor department getting involved here, right? Because if you can't fire somebody under labor laws, you can't fire somebody because they're an unmarried mother.
But actually, according to other laws, when you're working for a religious institution, they can give you standards where you have to live according to the rules of that religious institution. So
and that's where it gets interesting, right? Because is a synagogue supposed to hire people who don't live or believe in accordance with the Jewish faith, and the same with mosques and et cetera, et cetera. So you get into some territory here where the regular laws of civil employment relationships on the open market kind of don't apply, even though they should, or you can make the argument that they should. Josh, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, it's all very interesting, isn't it? I mean, I'm guessing that amongst the clergy, there's probably the odd unmarried parent or two. That, of course, is an entirely different scenario. I don't know. I mean, there have always been jobs that have kind of restrictions that apply over and above kind of equal opportunities. Even if it's just like kind of physical requirements or something like that. Although I know that those are being eroded in some places, like to be a firefighter, you don't necessarily have to carry such a heavy weight.
There's a push to perfectly democratize everything, regardless of some of the requirements that are kind of unique to the circumstances of the job. I'll put you on the spot here. Bottom line, yes or no, does the church, in its administrative, the people that it hires, civilians, so to speak, does it have the right to discriminate when it comes to people who may or may not live according to the rules of the church?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it seems hard to argue that there's any kind of like legal basis for that. Never mind, from a moral point of view. But actually, I do have a question a little bit about this. Saying that these women are mothers and they are unmarried.
Well, this is where I'm saying it's very contradictory information, because some of them were saying because the thing is, some of them were mothers, some of them were not, and the way and they were kind of trying to phrase it in some articles as if they were unmarried mothers. But when I started getting into the details, it turned out that there were married ones,
right.
Unmarried ones without children, and they just said we have married and unmarried women here with children, and that's why they fired them. It's like wait, the married ones have children.
They weren't precise about who was who.
But the thing is, I'm reading these articles, they're all slightly different. I'm like, am I getting the wording here wrong? Are they just trying to fudge it?
Okay, so they were married women who had children.
Oh, and then
there were unmarried women who don't have children.
Exactly, and one of the unmarried ones, one of the married ones, also has adopted kids and has.
Well, that's just being greedy, isn't it?
Yeah, a foster family is raising kids because she couldn't have apparently they couldn't have their own children.
Dr. Mike, same question for you. Does the church have the right to hire and fire whoever it wants for whatever reason?
Not whoever and for whatever, but yes, they do have certain rights by Polish law, and I would agree that they should have, especially if it's out in the open where we hire somebody we would like to let you know that, you have to live your life to these kind of standards, and if we find out that you're pimping out your 12-year-old and not letting us get in on the action, that you're fired.
Ouch, Dr. Mike, wow.
Hey, I have to play both sides of this field.
Civil up until there.
Especially since I'm usually more pro-church.
Are you surprised that this kind of role wasn't filled by someone within the church? I mean, why do they have to outsource this kind of thing?
No, but the thing is, apparently all these women were very, Catholic. They say how much and when they were let go, they even said they really appreciated working there. They wanted to help the church.
Well, you would think so. I mean, anybody who goes to work for the church, the archdiocese, is going to be kind of self-selected, and they know what they're getting into more or less. You're not going to have any anti-church people wanting to work for the archdiocese.
No, I doubt that, and I don't think the archdiocese would want anybody like that working for them. My gut feeling here is that there was just a bunch of internal office politics, people not getting along, having different ideas about how to do these things, and they just said screw it, just let them go, find somebody else to do it. I work in an office. I see this kind of stuff happening where, on a professional level, everything seems fine, but you can just tell some people are not getting along, or some people being unprofessional. It's I'm not going to let this piece of documentation go, through because I'm in a bad mood today or something like that.
Are you trying to say there's a lot of people in your office who want to see you fired? I would not be surprised at all. Last thing I'll mention.
In the public sector by any chance? Yes, I thought so. Yeah.
Last thing I'll mention on this, I'm kind of surprised. Actually, no, wait, I'll take that back. I'm not surprised. Well, I might be surprised. Doesn't the church seem really kind of, we say ham-fisted? What's the better way to say that? Awkward. They don't seem very clever or skilled when it comes to public relations. This is the kind of thing they should have considered a little more carefully before they did it. Inept, yeah. I mean, doesn't it seem like they should have known this kind of thing would blow up in their face?
I don't. The thing is, they just let them go, and apparently she wanted to be let go, and they, legally speaking, had the right to let them go, and there was no big.
Where's the controversy then?
The controversy is here that some other media sources put this together to have something bad to say about the church here. And that's what I'm saying. It's like no matter what they do, they find out that like one of the priests put, aluminum can in the paper bag by accident when we were recycling. It would be like they're raping Mother Earth here.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
that.
All right. Well, let's bring. We've talked enough about the church. Let's move on to something else. Let's move on. Let's move on to something we've talked about a couple of times over the last few months, and that is the major renovation that is basically coming to an end here in the next few weeks of the train line heading south from the train station behind. Behind Dietla, taking a left behind Starovision across the river. You've seen it, I'm sure. They've cleared out what used to be like an earth mound that supported the tracks.
An embankment.
An embankment, and now it's an elevated track. And the result part of the result is that we have a lot of open space all over the city where we didn't have any before. And it's kind of connecting neighborhoods that have always been next to each other, but you've never been able to walk from one street to the other. Suddenly it's all open. It's really great. But we learned this week, Dr. Mike, that PKP has kind of got some plans for that new space that kind of causes problems for other people who had other more creative plans on what to do with that space.
Yeah, so basically PKP says we're not giving up control of this, which is kind of pissed off.
PKP being the National Rail Line Service.
National Rail, Polish National Rail. And they said they want to let it be accessible to the public so it's nice and open, but they're not saying exactly what. You have to remember, like the city council and lots of public interest groups for the last few months have been talking up different plans on what could be done there. Parks, stores, parking as
retail
well,
space,
or just something. Opening it up. There's been a lot, but all of a sudden PKP is saying like, well, we're not going to give you access to this. And the city is annoyed because, well, if we can't buy this area or at least have long-term leases, then we're not going to invest in doing anything there.
Yeah, they're not going to do anything until the legal situation is cleared up.
Or something like that.
Yeah. So what is PKP saying? They're going to fence it off? I mean, how stupid is that?
No, but they're saying that they're going to be ones in charge of it, and they're not exactly saying what they want to do with it. They say all these nice and positive things about, accessible to the public, opening it up, but they're not really open to the idea of letting somebody else take care of it.
So actually, of course, the first thing that springs to mind is there land registry deeds in terms of who actually physically owns the land? Because I mean that's the first thing, isn't it? I don't think. I mean, if the land belongs to PKP or it's assigns or whatever the correct legal term is, then you would think that they have kind of first call on what to do with it. Now it may be the case that there are conditions attached to that, and maybe the city authorities do have. I mean, when it was an embankment before. There's not much you can do with embankment apart from it being earth that's underneath railway tracks. But now you've got railway track with like a vast amount of space.
And it's interesting legally. I mean, we're talking about open space that did not exist until about 6 weeks ago. It's just there. So does PKP own it by default because it's under their track, or the city?
Now look, I'm going to derail this slightly. Yes,
you were waiting for the opportunity.
I was. Yeah. On a couple of points.
You're going to get us off. You're going to get us off track here for a minute.
No, you're trying to deplatform me.
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay.
Picking up some mixed signals here.
All right, full steam ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
Right, so I cycled up around there yesterday on my way. It doesn't matter where I was going. And I was looking at it all, and I've been trying to figure out, we were talking a few weeks ago about this controversy over one of the bridges that it was going to be kept, but now they've got to knock it down. And I'm thinking, well, what difference does it make? They've got a new bridge there. Kind of, are they not just putting this new rail in? And then, I mean, originally I thought they were doing it to expand so that you had 4 tracks going north-south instead of 2. And then they started demolishing the embankments, and I thought, oh, no, I've got that wrong. It's just that they're replacing it all with this, modern-looking elevated thing. But now I see that the support pillars for the elevated section along Bleak, is it? Yeah. You can see that there's like a kind of, on one side, there's like a branch coming out with like...
the wires, the rebar is still there.
The rebar is still there.
It's unfinished. Yeah.
So they're going to build a second elevated section.
It does look that way.
So, and that is why they want to keep presumably they were keeping some of the bridges, not because they've got the new bridge alongside, but they're going to actually run the new elevators. They've now got the the new bit built, so the trains can revert to normal. And now, alongside that, they can build a further 2 lines.
They'll keep a door open for the future expansion.
I guess, yeah. So, but that doesn't really deal with any of what we've been talking about.
Well, it's a lot of space, all the way from the train station down to Holotargova, and then from Holotargova kind of curving to the left all the way to the river. This is a lot of space. I think parking should be the default choice. Of course, it depends on accessibility in different parts. Retail is kind of hard to imagine, this whole area being full of cafes. I mean, come on, who wants to sit under the train track? But, there could be a couple of stations along the way. Oh, stations, huh? And, what about a bike path? Maybe a bike path could be fit in there somehow?
A green bike path would be nice. There we have some trees, some plants all along that way.
Something. Don't just let it sit there. I mean, how stupid
reminds me of that kind of like Easter thing in the Christian church, which is, the stations of the cross. And you have this kind of mental image of like railway stations with people like, brandishing their fists at the destination boards.
We're really getting off track now, aren't we?
Yes. It's using the
How many stations? Is it 13 stations of the cross? How many stations of the cross are there?
12, I think.
12, 13? Yeah. We should ask the Archdiocese.
It's the stations of the mildly
they don't have the communications department right now to respond. But what happened is
are you married?
Council is basically
do you have children?
The city council has basically sent, asked for help from the national government here to pressure the rail network to give them access to it. So this is going to
give me my land.
Speaking of the city council, thank you, Dr. Mike. Speaking of the city council, let's talk about a guy who's on the city council, someone we've mentioned on our show before. Many months ago, there was some city business having to do with the homeless population and kind of what to do with them. And there's a city councilman by the name of Łukasz Vantuk.
Oh, is this the guy that wanted to recycle homeless people?
He wants to do a lot of interesting things. And he's got some kind of ideas that kind of, they get attention. Let's put it that way. And Dr. Mike, he's back in the news this week with his latest plan.
Yes, his latest idea that he was talking about recently was he seems to be a proponent of our beloved electric scooters, but he definitely wants to limit where they can go. He wants, the regulations to be, finally figured out, makes sense, but he also wants to ban from some of the major parks. Planty, for instance, I'm all for that, and also Park Invalidów and Park Jordana, lots of places that, people go with family and kids. He's saying, it's just dangerous, obstructive, and just annoying, and I agree completely with all those points. I hate going around the Planty right now. And first of all, you got the bicycles from left and right because nobody stays on the right bike path. Not to mention the moment there's times where you can't tell which part of it is for pedestrians and which part of it is for the bikes. And then you have the electric scooters who just zigzag between you.
I got to say, it seems that we've had this conversation several times on our show that the city council, this time for sure, they're definitely taking steps to limit where you can and cannot use the scooters, but nothing seems to get done. Is this time any different?
He just presented this idea, but, we can hope that, in a couple of weeks or months, there's actual legislation behind it.
I think there should be sharpshooters on the top of, prominent buildings, actually. That would be most
amusing.
There are people in the city council, and obviously Vantuk is one of them, but there's a portion of the how many councillors are there? Do you know, by the way, Dr. Mike?
No, but it's a couple of dozen.
At least. Why do we need a couple of dozen city councillors?
Anyway, all the dzielnice have several.
Anyway, I'll bet
you think we should just have one?
I'll bet you a good, 25%, maybe a third of the city council desperately hates the scooters. I'm sure of that. So whether or not they can get the 50% or whatever they need to pass legislation, might be a different question. But there is a core on the city council that is, maybe not sharpshooters, but they're ready to do something to really limit the range and accessibility of these scooters.
I'll just put cobblestones everywhere.
We have those, and it doesn't stop them.
Well, on pedestrian paths as well, just see them.
Well, remember what a couple of weeks ago when Marcin Cash was here to talk about scooters, he kind of
when we gave him a thorough going over,
he kind of made it clear that we haven't seen anything yet. This is just the beginning of the deluge. The
sounds like a threat to me. We need to prepare.
So we'll see how Vantuk responds to that, but. We have this conversation a lot now. I mean, people hate the scooters. The city's going to do something about it, and then it disappears. And then 6 weeks later, the city's going to do something about it because people hate scooters, and so on and so on.
Just to put this in perspective about Vantuk, kind of guy he is, a couple of months ago, he actually wanted to ban "quote unquote" homeless people from the center of town by making sure there were no charitable organizations handing out food here. And if organizations were handing out food or any kind of assistance to homeless people, these homeless people would first of all have to take a shower.
And he's he's the one who also invited the homeless population to attend the city council meeting.
Yeah, it's just
kind of a publicity stunt that worked.
It was a publicity stuff, but not too many homeless people showed up, and like people got angry and be like, "Oh, you're being so inhumane and horrible." And I'm like asking, like, wait a second, if I run around naked on the street, I'll get arrested. If I run around screaming, I'll get arrested. If I walk around smelling like shit like a homeless person, you can't touch me. What the hell? I think that last one is the most offensive of all the types of behaviors to people around, other people around. Of course, I understand these people need help, assistance, programs, but at that given moment, you need to just put them aside so the rest of us can function normally, as heartless as
we all know that feeling in the wintertime of stepping on a tram and stepping right into a wall of stench. I mean, it almost makes you, almost provokes a physical reaction out of you. It's so bad because these people get on the tram and sit there all day.
Another thing that he's proposed is getting rid of Wisła Stadium and having Wisła play in Krakow, because he's basically saying the city's losing so much money on Wisła, it's not going to make money. And even though it altogether costs hundreds of millions and they won't be able to sell it for like a fraction of that price, it just financially makes more sense than holding on to it. Because
for me, that's a step too far. This is fantasy land. That we're gonna somehow knock it down and make the two teams share a stadium that holds 12,000 people.
The original idea, like 10 years ago, was to build one larger stadium, like on the outskirts of town for all like sports teams in Krakow. And the
Wisła Stadium is a disaster. It is a financial disaster. It's an aesthetic disaster. It just all around, it's horrible. But to think that we're just gonna knock it down and start over, that's just too much for me.
I just think I agree with that, because I think the city needs to pull out. It shouldn't be putting any more money into it.
But fair enough. Let's turn to a couple of stories from the business world, I guess. They're kind of connected in that sense. You probably almost certainly heard a week ago, 2 weeks ago now, that Thomas Cook, the huge...
A few days ago.
Is it a few days ago?
Yeah.
Was it a week ago?
It was not even a week.
Moving along.
Well, let's say by the time you guys hear this, it'll be a week ago. Thomas Cook, the famous and legendary travel agency in the UK, went bankrupt. And part of the snowball effect of this, one of the consequences, is that Neckermann, which is a well-established brand here on the Polish market, and they have some kind of ties to Thomas Cook at some higher corporate level that I'm not sure about, Dr. Mike, but Neckermann Polska announced their bankruptcy just a couple of days ago as well. It's just kind of shocking because, they are a fixture at every mall in Poland, has a Neckermann office, familiar brand from, advertising and whatnot, and it's just suddenly gone.
And this is not only a popular brand; it's a brand that's associated a little more at the top end of the market. So percentage-wise, they didn't have that many people going through it. But from a financial standpoint, they were a bigger share of the market, since most of the trips there cost 20, 30, 40% more.
Like a high margin business.
Because these were like better vacation spots, more tropical, more distant. Neckermann was like, if you were going on a Neckermann trip, that meant you were a little better off than the rest of us going with like a Rainbow or Grecos or something.
Here's what I don't get. Here's what I was thinking about this, and you guys tell me what you think. And Dave, I think Dave, he's listening right now. I wish he was here right now to give me his opinion, because he probably knows something about this. With the business model of travel agencies, it's kind of like airlines. They take money now for services they're going to provide well into the future. So they should have a very, very positive, almost overflowing cash flow in the moment, in current accounts, right? So I don't understand that, given the fact that they can sell things that they don't have to provide yet. Again, sometimes months, years in advance. How is it that this industry is constantly plagued by poor cash flow, financial problems, and especially at this time of the year, September, when presumably they're just coming off their busiest season of the year, the summertime vacation season? How does this happen so often? Is it mismanagement, or is there something inherent in the business plan of travel agencies that makes life difficult?
Well, I think it's a very reasonable question, but I guess the thing is, with any kind of business, if you look at the mirror image of that, a kind of business which has to do a lot of expense up front and doesn't get recompensed for it until much, much later on, which is actually how most people, if you provide a service or whatever, operate a business. You factor that into your accounting, so that you will, you expect kind of like, my expenditure is going to be X amount, and then like 12 weeks later or so, there's going to be income that will match that previous expenditure. But in the meantime, I will, be expending again, and you have a credit situation to go along with that. And I would think similarly, if you're in a kind of business where you're getting payment up front for a service that you're going to deliver further down the line, and bearing in mind that there will be competition in that industry, that you have a kind of you deal with your finances in the sense that the money is already there, but in order to be competitive, you need to kind of like offer things that are better than what your competitor is offering, which means kind of essentially having some kind of credit situation. And I guess actually the end of summer for a travel company to go bust is kind of because they've, the money that they would have made this summer would have been paid probably around Christmas, in the new year. So,
so where's that money?
Well, it's all gone, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, there wouldn't really be, people planning on going on holiday in September, October, which is obviously a much smaller number. They would have booked their holidays around Easter time. There hasn't been the money coming in for the people who want to go on holiday in, I don't know, January or February to the Canary Islands. What I don't know.
They're selling a good like anybody else. They know their costs. They build in the margin is built into the price. And again, they're selling stuff for goods that don't even exist yet. They should be well ahead of the game. Dr. Mike, you want to and also, do we want to take the easy way out and blame the internet for this? People arranging their own holidays?
I know Thomas Cook was having trouble with competing against internet sales years ago. They were one of the first big names that actually had their own website. Don't just book it, cook it with their website, Thomas Cook it, whatever. I think
so clever.
Yeah. But they were a monolith because you have to understand Thomas Cook. It doesn't just buy hotel rooms and packages for you as the customer. They actually had some of their own hotels. They had their own planes and airlines which you're involved with, and those are huge costs that go both ways. Plus, what they often do is they offer you a deal, and you pay for that, but they're using the money they got from you to pay for the tourists that are on holiday right now. It's kind of like Social Security or something like that. And if costs are something that change during the year when they're negotiating, all of a sudden they get less money coming in now because nobody wants to travel in 3 months and they're having trouble covering their costs for right now, cash flow can really, really start to hurt. Thomas Cook actually had financial problems more than 10 years ago where they were getting money and loans from investors to keep going. They got several £100 million, but they somehow didn't restructure, and now they were asking for a second round of investment. Some people saying even £1 billion were needed.
But just like the Thomas Cook in the UK, here in Poland, plenty of people were on holiday when the announcement was made, and they were kind of stranded and all over the world. Various arrangements made, including, I guess, military and government planes to get these people back home. Doesn't there have to be a criminal element here? If you're running the company, how do you not know that your company is going to come to a halt, permanently closed just days from now, and you're still taking money from people online and in your stores? You're still sending your planes, taking people all over the world. And that, for example, 3, 5, 7 days from now, you're going to say, okay, that's it, we're done, and pull the plug.
Well, in fact, that
must be criminal.
I mean, it's even finer margins than that. I mean, on the very day that they announced that kind of it's all gone, tits up, 2 or 3 hours previously, they'd been assuring people at airports on the phone.
Exactly.
That, everything is fine, everything. But I mean, I guess, this is not
fraud?
To condone, of course, this behavior, but I mean, I guess what happens is firstly, at the highest level, there's going to be a knowledge, okay, this is not good.
But we're going to get those investors last moment, no problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've always got that hope. And so as long as you've always got that hope, you really don't want to kind of spread the panic around the rest of the company.
Because that will definitely get rid of the potential.
Yeah, but how low is your bank account level when, from one Monday to the next Monday, you go from everything's fine to that's it, we're out of business?
I'm guessing no, but a lot of businesses work this way with cash flow. They expect this much money to come in and have these kind of costs, and if those things aren't perfectly aligned, they start to lose money really fast.
Well, yeah, and it's not even. I mean, it's not even real money. I mean, what it is kind of it's a credit facility. I mean, banks. If you're a solvent business or whatever, and you need to pay out, I don't know, $100,000 in wages at the time when you haven't got the money coming in to cover that, the bank goes, but we know you're good for this, so you get a 2-day loan and a minimal interest rate.
I mean, this is what I heard with Neckermann. They were actually, from a financial standpoint, doing quite well. They were getting enough money to cover everything, but since they were tied to Thomas Cook, which the money went to Thomas Cook as well, so they would send off this money to the parent company and then wait for the money to come back so they could pay the people they owe money to, and all of a sudden, in 2 days, they say we're not getting this money. Ah, crap.
Well, they were giant international,
I mean, the oldest,
businesses with
like
millions of dollars,
178 years in operation.
millions of dollars of turnover, and we're three guys on a podcast. So what do we know? I guess we'll defer to them, I guess. But still, the explanation is kind of beyond me at this. I just don't get how this happens and why it seems to be particularly an issue in the travel industry. I remember 10, 12 years ago here in Poland, there were another couple of agencies. Forget, you remember the name, maybe, Dr. Mike? I've forgotten the names. But the same thing, into the summer, maybe middle of the summer, sorry, we're closed and we can't help you.
was one of them.
Which one?
Taramara or Taramara.
There was another one.
There's a couple of it, but it was for a while. It was happening like almost every year. There'd be like a smaller or mid-sized one would go under. But then they brought in some like insurance claims that you had to have money to back this up or to bring back the passengers, etc.
Well, I suspect, actually, I'm thinking about this for a moment. I suspect what the thing is that you normally have a situation where you have the travel agent, which is a kind of a broker, really, and then there are the airlines. There are, or if not the actual airlines, then the people who lease aircraft. You have hotels or apartment buildings in holiday destinations, and I would imagine that the normal thing is that you kind of yes, we've got kind of 10,000 people coming to stay in this place in your hotel for X amount of days, and which means that we owe you this amount of money. Now, the travel companies, its credit gets stretched, it gets later and later paying the hotel, and then at some point the hotel says, "Do you know what? We're not going to put up any of your guests anymore. You're a bad customer. We will put up your guests if you pay us up front, because we know that your customers are paying you up front. Now we want you to pay us up front instead of settling like a month later." So all of a sudden the cash flow situation gets reversed, and the travel agent is having to, because it's now become a bad credit risk with its own customers, it then has to pay in advance.
Well, if you're looking for 20, 25 meters of free space in shopping malls all over the country, well, this is a good time to look, because Neckermann is going to they are everywhere. Every mall has a Neckermann, I think.
And it's one of those brands that just look, you're associated with something better, and it's like, well, it's going to...
Because it's German sounding.
Let's move on to another business story this week. This is interesting. Let's dive into this, guys. This has got a lot of interesting angles to it. Tesco Poland has announced that this upcoming holiday season, Christmas season, they will not sell live carp. Of course, as you know, carp is a standard part of Christmas Eve dinner in Poland. And for as long as anybody can remember, you could go to a supermarket, or before that to a smaller meat shop. They had live carp. You could say, "I want that one." They would take it out, kill it for you, wrap it up, you take it home. Or you can just take home a live carp and kill it yourself as well after keeping it in your bathtub for a few days, but that's a different story. Anyway, Tesco announces that they're no longer going to have these live carp because of animal welfare concerns. And apparently after a pressure campaign by some animal rights groups, guys, where do we stand on Tesco's decision here?
Pussies.
Wow.
Fish. Well, can I still buy live goldfish, though, somewhere at aquariums? Is that animal cruelty? It's food that's just kept a little fresh. If there are arguments about them, they're kept in bad conditions, bottled up, and it's stress makes it taste bad. First of all, carp tastes like crap anyway.
Exactly. The best carp on the planet is shit.
It's basically in its name. It's an anagram of what it is. Yeah.
Park.
Yeah. So honestly, I really don't care. If you're mistreating animals for pleasure, then that's not right. But if this is about whether the carp will be slaughtered right there in front of you if you take it home, or if it's done in a factory, by the tens of thousands at once, so you have slightly less fresh crap.
Taken outside the back and quietly shot. Yeah.
Oh, do they all die happily? Yeah.
Well, I thought. Okay, so maybe I thought the thing with keeping the carp in the bathtub at home, or in a tank of clear water in Tesco, was because these beautiful God's creatures are bottom feeders, and that their kind of intestines mainly consist of the stuff that we would
prefer not to digest.
Prefer not to digest. You leave them in water for a few days, and it rinses out, it flushes out.
That's why they did the bathtubs in Poland, exactly.
Right.
And back then, they didn't have the infrastructure. They basically took them out of those reservoirs from those mud pits and gave them to people. And then you had to do the filtering yourself, leave it at home for 2 days in the bathtub.
Right, yeah.
Now it's left like that in the supermarket where it's going through fresh, clean water. But I'm just assuming as well that for Tesco, this might be just, one way to virtue sequel, but another way to lower their costs. Well, they have like 1 or 2 facilities that will go through the fresh water.
So how do they
slaughter them in one place, and they just have to ship them without having to keep them alive along the way, which is probably a little more difficult and complicated. They won't have to have the aquariums or the tanks in the actual stores keeping them alive. It'll be just like any other fish.
So how do they kill them? Actually, have people been traumatized by signs of the fish kind of staff in Tesco's kind of like wrestling with these mighty beasts from the tanks, and then I don't know, what do they do? Cut their head off? Or
no, it's a hammer, something like a hammer. Like
what? If you're the kind of person that's traumatized by that, please, I hope you're never in a position of influence or power. Unfortunately, I don't.
Yeah, okay. Let's all agree. Let's agree that carp sucks, and we don't understand why people love it. I think we talked about this in our Christmas show last year. Okay, carp sucks. Okay, but the issue here is Tesco caving into a small but very determined and vocal minority to change a policy that most people don't have a problem with.
I think so, but they don't lose too much on it.
No, they don't.
Because the people who don't really care about it don't really care about it either way. So like, whatever. There'll be a small percentage of like, oh, but I like getting a live one. It was like a part of the Christmas tradition, etc. But most people were like, whatever. It's crap fish that I only eat this time of year anyway. And then you have the large vocal minority that Tesco is now trying to
small vocal minority.
Small, sorry, loud. I meant to say that they want to step in front of and say like, look, we're nice people too, but before long it's like, well, don't serve fishes at all, don't serve any type of meat products. It
is a couple of things here. I would say, first of all, it's a very good illustration of how small groups, with very targeted protests and targeted pressure can get results, can get the changes that they're after, because as you said, I think you said, the majority of people are kind of indifferent. They really don't care. So there's not really a lot of pushback on this, right? Yeah. So you can go to your corporate giants, Tesco's and maybe other supermarkets, and say, look, this is bad from an animal welfare perspective. It'll make you look good from PR. You can seem like you're kind of listening to community interest when it comes to this kind of thing, and not much to lose. And so fine. And most people are reading this or hearing about this and saying, you know what, I didn't have a problem with the live carp, and this is how we've always done it. But whatever, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. So it's an illustration of how targeted activism can work. But I also think, I'm speaking personally here, this is a sign that we're just getting soft. We're so soft. We're getting upset about fish being killed. And Dr. Mike, before we started recording, we were talking about this, and I said, when you go to the meat department at Tesco or any other supermarket, where do you think that meat came from? Right? It was not donated, right? It was not kind of like an animal that died of old age and they immediately harvested the meat. No. It's production. It's mass production, right? And it seems kind of weird that in this day and age that so many people still don't make this connection between the nice little, wrapped package they pick up from the meat department and an animal that was walking around on 4 legs just weeks before. I don't know how long it takes to get to the supermarket.
There's a lot of detachment from that.
We're just removed from this, and we're not so far separated in history.
You've not had a conveation with a vegan.
But wait, how many decades ago was it when people, if you wanted chicken, you went out in the yard and grabbed the chicken and cut its head off and ate it, or the same thing with a pig, or
well, actually, I'd leave the head and I'd eat the rest of the chicken. But that's
so and today everything is so sanitized, and kind of we just don't like to be reminded that we're eating a live animal. And I think it's ridiculous,
and we're like applying our own morality to our food, which is just a terrible way to go. I mean,
it's not like they were taking a fish and kind of like cutting it to a million pieces and
waterboarding
it, spreading the blood all over their faces. No, we're just
making its children watch.
We're killing it with a hammer, wrapping it in a piece of paper or a bag or whatever it is, and you send people home, and then they eat it. They take it home and they cut the fish apart and they put it in a frying pan and then they eat it. I mean, come on,
with potatoes. Yeah, but look, I mean, there's another thing potatoes. Here. Wrenched, screaming from the ground, still with clumps of soil.
Skin torn off and thrown into boiling water while it's still alive.
Or even boiling fat in worst case scenario. But look, I haven't really seen anything about this in the news or there been any discussion, but my impression, so this is completely without any factual basis whatsoever, is that Tesco is not the force in Poland that it used to be. I, from time to time, go to the big Tesco, which is actually their Polish headquarters on Kapelanka.
Kapelanka, yeah.
Now, that used to be more than one half of the entirety of the first floor of that building. It is now 2/3, if that, of the size that it was.
Yeah.
The range of, shall we say, speciality items that it stocks is much, much diminished. There's a lot less need for me to go there, for example. I have a list of things like, I can get that, but I can only get that in the big Tesco. And some of these
they
things
used to have a lot more things you couldn't get in other places.
Yeah.
I think they are very much in decline in the Polish market. In fact, I think they're looking for a way out, as a matter of fact. They were dominant in the 90s when the business model was a big a destination type place where people would drive and do mega shopping. And now that it's kind of changed towards a smaller Biedronka, Lidl type, neighborhood stores, Tesco has not kept up with that. And I think they're really hurting financially.
There's also, just very quickly, the other thing that I've noticed is that there is a much, much smaller percentage of their own brand goods now. You would previously see Tesco this, Tesco that, like on all the shelves. Yes, it's still there, but nothing like to the same extent.
Tesco's actually planning some huge expansions more than 10 years ago, just before the financial breakdown, which kind of put a brakes on that. You notice how now you have all these Carrefour Expresses and Zapkas everywhere?
Yeah.
Tesco wanted to bring that, like the Tesco Express model to Poland 10 years ago, which would have then been a great idea. Yeah. But it's, they got hit hard with a financial problem. They had to stop, and all these other things popped in the meantime.
The supermarket business here is, of course, it's the same everywhere, but it's especially brutal. It's absolute cutthroat here. And I'm not surprised that somebody's dropping out.
But you can't kill the carp.
Well, but Żabka have done well, actually, because Carrefour are huge. This French kind of combine, and so you'd expect them to have the muscle to be able to, dominate the high street, which they have done. But Żabka are, they've been growing as well, haven't they?
They're everywhere. And from where I live right now, I have 3.
They're also frogs, I suppose.
A 4-minute walk, plus like 2 other convenience stores, plus 2 Carrefour Expresses within like a 4 or 5 minute walk. I don't have to cross the street to get to 2 of them.
Let's bring things to a close with a huge, huge story. We probably should have opened the show with this, but we're going to save it for last before we go. Guys, we learned this week that in May of next year, CELINE Dion will be here in Krakow for a concert.
What?
Yeah, I know.
I think the tickets go on sale any day now.
Excited?
Like I'm getting my camp gear ready so I can line up outside.
Josh, I know you're going to be there.
No, I'm not. I'm not a fan actually of the Canadian songstress.
I looked at the schedule for the Krakow Arena for next year, and there are bookings already set up until November of next year, 14 months from now, for what's his name, the blind Italian opera singer guy. What's his name?
Leonardo da Vinci. No,
what's his name?
I don't know.
I didn't know there was a blind Italian.
God, are you crazy? The time to say goodbye, schmaltzy pop opera bullshit.
He's blind. I don't know.
Oh my God, what's his
Stevie
name?
Wonder?
Jesus Christ.
Ray Charles?
Oh, Jesus, I can't think of his name. I just saw it last night. You don't know this? You don't know this guy?
No, blind Italian opera singer.
Italiano blindo, I don't know.
Oh my God, am I going to have to look this up on my, Jesus, the people listening, everybody listening now knows this guy's name. And we don't know.
Yes. But it's like, I vaguely know that song. I have no idea who sings it. It's not really,
Is it important that he's blind?
Well, it's
you can't see what he's singing.
Okay, let's watch this. Hey Google, answer me, damn it. Goddamn phone.
Isn't it Alexa? Don't you have to call her by name?
Google her on my phone. I'm going to ask, hey Google, what's the name of the blind Italian opera singer?
Here is some information about Amazon Alexa.
What? God damn it. Who did that? Google, you're an idiot. What's the name of the blind Italian opera singer?
Andrea Bocelli Omrio MDS.
Thank you, Andrea Bocelli. You didn't know this?
Andrea Bocelli Omrio MDS.
Okay, shut up. Shut up. Shut up.
Served your purpose now. Shut up, bitch.
You never heard of Andrea Bocelli?
I have heard the name,
Thank you.
yeah.
Jeez.
I didn't know what he did.
Anyway.
Or if it was even a he or a she.
Anyway,
actually.
he's like a pop opera singer. He's not a proper opera singer. He's a pop opera singer. Here's my question, though. Celine Dion, Andrea Bocelli, not the kind of show where you go there and kind of jump in the mosh pit in the front row and kind of get rowdy. This is the kind of thing where people dress up and then just sit and listen,
There's
passively.
obviously something. I think that it's obviously
Not
a good.
for me.
It's obviously a good gig for the performer, isn't it? I mean, like Michael Bublé, who is also
that's
kind of
another one.
approximately falls into that kind of group. I mean, he's now played twice in the Taron Arena,
Yes.
sold out both occasions.
Yes.
I know people who've been. Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, I'm coming out now. I know people who have been to see Michael Bublé, and it's a fantastic evening experience.
Just admitting that you know people that have gone to that concert is the equivalent of coming out.
Wait, but I just don't. If it were an intimate, small little club, okay, I can get it. But when you go to a 15,000 seat arena with that kind of music and that kind of performer, I just don't see how you get a connection.
It'd be kind of good if we knew a little bit more about the behind the scenes at the Taron Arena, and kind of.
We've been there, yeah.
Oh
yeah,
yes,
but
we have. Yeah.
Anyway, Celine Dion.
Dave,
Josh, not a fan. Mike,
No, not a fan.
No,
at all.
not a fan,
My
no.
wife is though.
really?
I'm a little worried. I hope she doesn't realize.
Like she was previously a fan of the CrakCast.
I mean, I would say she's a huge fan or anything like that, but she's definitely like said, "Oh, she's got a great voice and some nice songs and blah blah blah."
She's got very weird ears, though.
Yeah, that's the only part of her that's
She's
weird.
got weird ears.
Yeah, she really does.
That's the first thing you think of when you think of Celine Dion.
Well, there's not much else that I have.
I mean, let's put it honest.
Think about.
For a non-human species, it's a very good approximation. So like give credit to that.
All right, I'm going to draw a line right there at the Celine Dion's ears is a sign that we're getting way, way off track. Anyway, that's
Well,
the
you've
news
got a
this week.
cue for the picture you're going to put on the.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time on the KrakCast News.